Good afternoon. Afternoon. Good morning, everyone. How are you? Clearly, I've been up early working. I'm already saying it's afternoon and it's 10 o'clock. How are you, Lori?
Afternoon, and actually I'm in a different time zone, so it's 11 o'clock where I'm at, so it's almost afternoon. In fact, when the time switches, I'll be back to 10 a.m. I get like a little extra hour from you guys right now, which is
Oh,
nice.
nice.
We all
But
need a couple extra minutes, and an extra hour or something will really help. How are you doing this morning, Lauren, other than being up early?
I I am doing well, thank you. Excited for today's guest and just excited to um for today's show. I mean, we always have really great shows and I know this one won't be any different. So,
We got another good one. And this one, like I said, I'm going to call it the overflow show last time because we could have gone on for 2 hours with questions and everything. So this is a comeback from the overflow show. So with that, with no further ado, I'm going to have you kick off, Lauren, and you're also going to mention some things about the economic opportunity grants. That's right around the corner. So guys, stay tuned for this as well.
all right, so here we go. I am going to go ahead and share my screen. Let's make sure. Oh, it's not showing my screen. Here we go. Let's do it again. I think if I put it over here.
I bet you got a bunch of windows open too.
Well, you know, I'm a multitasker for sure.
You are. Okay. We see a lot of things right now, but we see something.
Are you able to see? It should just be my slides.
Yep, I could see the slides and the preview, but you're good to go.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Lori. And let's launch it. All
There
right,
you
Lori,
go.
are we good?
Yep, perfect.
Okay, awesome. So good morning again, everyone. My name is Lauren Simpson. I would love to welcome you to another episode of Small Biz Talk, Solutions for Your Small Business with our fabulous host, Lori Williams. So let me go ahead and dive into who we are and what we're doing here, and then I'll pass it over to Lori. Again, my name is Lauren Simpson. I'm with the SBDC, or the Small Business Development Center. We're a national program with over 1,000 locations across the country, and we offer no-cost services to local small businesses. Our services are at no cost to you or no cost to those small businesses because your tax dollars have already taken care of all of our fees. For the Los Angeles network, we cover the counties of Los Angeles, Santa Barbara, and Ventura. So if you are within any of those counties, please be sure to get in contact with one of our local centers. You can see them represented by the red waymarks on the map in front of you. You'll see that we are as far out as Camarillo, over to Santa Clarita, and then we've got Pasadena, over to Laverne, throughout Los Angeles, the South Bay, as well as all the way down to Long Beach. So we cover a vast area. So again, we offer no cost services to you. That includes no cost business advising. And so you're able to sit one-on-one via Zoom with one of our business experts. You may even have the opportunity to sit with our guru of numbers, Ms. Lori Williams. She also has amazing colleagues that cover topics in the areas of marketing, as well as, again, taxes and finance. If you're looking to create a business plan, honestly, whatever step you're in when it comes to your journey to entrepreneurism, we have experts for you. We have assistants for you. You could just be starting out, or you could be like a 20-year veteran. Trust us, we have free resources that you can definitely partake in. We also offer virtual trainings, much like the comprehensive training you will be joining today, or our show, not a training. Oh, that was weird. There we go. So please be sure to get in contact with us today. You can reach us by phone, 866-588-7232, or you can go online and you can go to smallbizla.org/new client. If you have reached us now outside of the Los Angeles, Santa Barbara, or Ventura counties, please be sure to go to americassbdc.org/find your SBDC. So let me go ahead and stop this screen share really quickly. I'm going to pull up another screen, Lori.
Yep.
You are very much so aware of a new program that we have coming online. Going to go to the right tab. Here we go. So everyone, we are excited to share with you a new grant program. Sorry. Lori, can you see my screen okay?
Yep, I can. The Economic Opportunity Grants. And this link is also going to be put in the chat by Lauren as soon as she's done. And we've been talking about this program for a while, and I think it's coming live next couple days or so.
Tomorrow, that's right. The 20th January. I had to remember what month we were in. January 26th is the launch. And like Lori mentioned, I'll be putting a URL or a link in the chat. And when you go to that URL, I want to please be sure to read the information that you see on the screen so that you can familiarize yourself with the program. And then also note this sign-up sheet here. So again, because we haven't launched yet, we want to be sure that you receive all the information that comes out once it does launches. So be sure to find the sign up form, fill in all of your information here, and we'll be sure to, oh, and then you want to make sure that you sign up. So click this button here. It's a very long button, but please click it. And then you will be made aware of any updates that we have related to this program. I will scroll back up. This is the logo. So anytime you see this here, you'll know that you are receiving information related to the Economic Opportunities Grant, or the acronym is EOG. All right, Lori. So I stopped my screen share. Let me do quick housekeeping. Let's be sure to put all questions into the Q&A. And then the chat will be reserved for any links and information that we'd like to share with you. All right, Lori, it's all yours. Good morning again.
Perfect. Good morning, Lauren. Okay, Lauren's going to have a whole bunch of links in the chat. I wanted to start out a little bit by talking about tax preparers. It's tax season, and I'm getting a lot of questions from clients. How do I find a good CPA? What are the different certifications, etc.? So I'm just going to kind of go over this briefly. Now, at the very bottom of the slide, IRS has articles that they put out all the time. They got a really good one called Choosing a Tax Preparer. It includes free filing services as well as how to check credentials. And Lauren is going to put that link in the chat right now so you can get access to it. But just a little quick notation. So you understand the titles of different tax preparers. Most people are familiar and use the term CPA. So a CPA is an accountant who passed exams in a particular state. The CPA exams and training, although this percentage is not correct, is just to communicate, maybe half of their background training is in accounting and another half in tax. Once again, percentages aren't correct. I'm just trying to give you an idea that they learn two aspects. They learn accounting and they learn tax. Now, an enrolled agent, also known as an EA, this is what I have just recently in the last year become. That is a tax advisor who is federally authorized and empowered by the U.S. Department of Treasury. Much more intensive sessions, but it's all around taxation, really not any accounting. So if someone is an EA and has no accounting background, they may be not understanding your financial statements and QuickBooks as much, but then you need to look into their background. For example, for me, having been a CFO for years with a training in finance and then enrolled agent with a training in tax. So that's the difference between an EA and a CPA. And often you'll see, just like myself, MBA and then CPA or EA. Now, there is also a California Tax Education Council, that's CTEC. Now, what happens in California, if you charge a fee for doing taxes, you must go through a training and be certified. But this is minimum background and training, and somebody that has the CTEC training cannot represent clients before the IRS. So if you get audited and you want somebody to represent you before the IRS, attorneys, CPAs, and enrolled agents may do so. So that's a little bit of the background on the different types of tax preparers and the differences between their background training. I made this announcement the last couple of weeks. Just once again, if you are in some of these areas where you have been affected by the storm, the deadline to file your taxes and fund your accounts has been delayed a little bit longer. Highlights on upcoming classes. I've got the financial literacy series, which is turning out to be really a winner. So I keep repeating it. So I've got session 3 coming up next week. And then I've got the February schedule already for the other sessions. Session 1 is a general overview. Session 2 digs deep into what's the minimum you must know about your company. And session 3 gets into really managing and decision-making through financial analysis. You can take them out of order. I always suggest that session 2 and 3 go nicely together, but you can take them in any order that you desire. The webinar that I gave, I guess it was last week or the week before, what is the best legal structure for my company and what are the tax advantages? Once again, this was a big hit, so I'm going to repeat it. I don't have a date coming up, but I will get a date on the calendar and I'll make an announcement next week. And I've got one new webinar that I'm working on right now, and I might call it something different, but for right now, I'm calling it Navigating a Schedule C Tax Return. I'm wanting to do a webinar where I go over kind of line item by a line item, what's on a Schedule C, which is the form you would be using if you're a sole prop or an LLC. So people have a familiarity with it. They can look at it, they can see it, they can understand it. And then a shout out on next week, we have our own Emma Green. I'm sure Emma's in the audience right now. Good morning, Emma. The tennis elbow queen. I've asked Emma to come back on the show as well as some other guests that will be coming up in the next several weeks and months. People who've been at the game for a long time. Emma's been at the game for a long time now. And I'm asking them to come back and say, what have you learned along the way? You know, we talked with several people about their experiences in starting a company. Now we're going to get into running a company, which of course, if you're starting up, that's information you want to know as well. Then we got our own favorite, Deborah Darris, coming back on. I was trying to get her and track her down to get her to sign to a date. And she's our social media goddess, talks about marketing. And I think we're also going to have one of our conversations that we always engage in about how to optimize all possibilities in your life and how to look at life in a positive way, as her and I both have similar beliefs on that. Now, on February 15th, I've got Sebastian DeVivo coming on. We had Keith and Nate, both from the ACT team for SBDC. They had talked about loans and lending. And every time they've been on, we've gotten great interest in microloans and other funding options, basically for if you can't get a traditional bank loan. So I've asked Sebastian, who is also an advisor at the SBDC at the Pasadena location, shout out to the Pasadena location here. He's going to talk about microloans and other funding options. So that is what is coming up in the near future. We've got a great lineup all the way through March, and I'll be talking about that as well. But what I'd like to do is now talk about today's show. As I said, it's a spillover show because last time we had this guest on, the amount of questions were overwhelming. So Xiomara Palma is the founder and CEO of Solvit HR, a certified human resource professional with over 15 years of HR experience across multiple industries. Xiomara specializes in helping small businesses remain in compliance with workplace regulations. Now, I've often said there is no such thing today as a small company. Now, I know those are strange words to say. Well, this is what I mean. I remember having my small company decades ago. And when I thought about HR, I would think, oh, those are for the bigger companies. I don't have to worry about HR. I'm just a small company. I just have a few employees. But today it's different because the HR laws encompass the smallest companies. The minute you get one employee, you have HR laws specific to you. Moreover, AB 5, which is something we're going to be talking about, restricts many small companies from hiring independent contractors, forcing them instead to hire them as employees. So everybody out in the audience, even if it's just you today, tomorrow, HR could be a very important topic. So with that, Xiomara, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for coming back to talk with us today. I'm
It's a
so happy to have
pleasure.
you back.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here with you all.
You know,
As-
I heard a long time ago, this was back in, I think, my business college days, where they said the greatest asset and liability of any company is walking the shop floor, meaning your employees, right?
yes,
And I have always held that so true. And I tell you, as a turnaround CFO, I would always be, oh my God, the employees that we don't have the money. Oh my God, the employees, we need them to make the sales, and it really reminded me again of the asset and liability concept. But where I thought we would start today is with this AB5, because AB5 is a law that, first of all, many are still not familiar with, and it got launched kind of right before the pandemic, got thrown to the wayside, and then it's coming back into play.
right.
Or went away, but it's coming back into play. And I swear, Xiomara, I talk to people every day and they just don't even know what it is. So why don't we start with, what is AB5 and why does it matter to everybody in the audience?
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you. I One of the things I want to start out with, I just have so many ideas as you're speaking, running through my head where I want to talk. But in the gist, AB5, what it did is it created a new test by which employers need to classify their workers as either an independent contractor, a true independent contractor, or if that test is not met, then that means that that worker is potentially an employee that you need to add onto your payroll. So that test is the ABC test. That's what AB5 did. It created a new test. Prior to AB5, we had a different test. We had the Borrello test, which is still in existence. So technically, right now, we have two different tests that we need to go by in order to figure out whether someone is or can be classified as an independent contractor. So it's an area that's very confusing for many people because there are some exemptions to AB5, and they may think, okay, because there's an exemption to AB5, this person is truly an independent contractor, I can classify them. Not a lot of the time. When AB5 doesn't apply, and when a position is exempt, then we have to go and rely on the original Borrello test and truly figure out if this person is an independent contractor. So the Borrello test focuses on more of the employer exerting control over the worker. So they are providing assignments, they are telling the employee or the worker what hours to work, they are giving certain they're given tools to the employees to perform the work, etc. So the employer is truly in control over the work that is being performed. What the ABC test did under AB5 is that it came up with 3 different criteria that need to be met. 1A is that the worker is free from control and direction. So it kind of touches on the Borrello test a little bit. And then B, that the worker performs work that is outside the normal course of the hiring entity's business. So it cannot be the same line of work. And C, that the worker is engaged in an independently established trade or business of the same nature of the services that they are providing.
Gotcha. And the one that seems very challenging that immediately impacts people is this B section, which I'm going to just, put it in my words, but it's outside the usual course of business. Now, I may get this a little wrong, so correct me if need be, but I remember I followed up on the bill and followed it when it became a law and went to the government website and read up on it. And they had at the time, I don't know if they still do, but they had some examples. They said, for example, if you are paying somebody to work in their home to make a recipe for cakes so you can then bake cakes and sell it in your restaurant, they are an employee because they are developing a recipe and you sell cakes. So they are an employee. They must be an employee. And it had the only example that they gave where someone would not be the employee is that, say your computer breaks and you're doing something else, you're not in the computer repair. So
Mhm.
where I saw it hit a lot of companies, and I'll give one example, is someone like a yoga studio. And maybe they did all of the classes themselves. They just rented and leased out a space a couple days a week. Then
Mhm.
they wanted somebody to just come in for 1 hour on a Friday and teach a class. And they would say to me, Lori, surely I don't have to hire them as an employee for just 1 hour. And I'd say, yes,
Yes,
you
you do.
do. And I wanted to break it down for people in our audience to know that this is something that's pretty hard to not have to hire them as an employee, because in my experience, why do we hire independent contractors? Usually sales goes up and we want them to participate in one part of the delivering of the product or service because sales
Right.
goes up. So by default, they become pretty much in this status of usual business activity. Now, I know there was some exemptions at the beginning. I don't know where they went. I don't know if hairdressers
Mhm.
eventually got exempt. I don't think they did. But talk
Mhm.
a little bit about the exemptions. I don't think the hairdressers got the exemption.
Yeah, the exemptions that originally came out when the law was first set in place back in 2020 were marketing, real estate agents, anything in, for example, human resources. A lot of professional services got exempted. Trying to think here off the top of my head. Attorneys, there were a lot. I
Yeah.
don't have them all memorized, but there were a lot of exemptions. But again, those exemptions do not necessarily mean that those people are automatically an independent contractor, right?
Yep.
It just means that they are exempt from the ABC test, from AB5. At any given point, even let's hypothetically speaking, say you truly have an independent contractor, you hire someone that provides services to you outside your normal scope of your business, and you're not controlling their time, and they are established business themselves. At any time, even if you do meet the independent contractor test, either both the ABC and the Barella test, at any time an employer can inadvertently override that exemption, that independent contractor exemption. And it has to do, again, if you hire someone on a consistent basis, right? If this person is providing services to you, say on a weekly or on a bi-weekly basis, you are beginning to control their work. You're telling them what you need, when you need it, and what hours they need to perform it. So at any time, even if the Barella test and the ABC test are met, you could potentially create an employer and employee type of relationship if you're not careful with the scope of work that this person is performing for you. So that's what's important too, to have a contract and to have an agreement outlining the scope of work that this independent contractor is going to perform for you.
Got it. And we're going to come back there in a second because I want to elaborate on it. But before we do, let's go into C for a second, because it talks about being an established business. And I think we use sometimes the terminology bona fide business. So at the time, Xiomara, and I'm sure you heard this as well, I heard people say, well, let me just get a LLC and that's going to make me okay. And I'm like, no, because it's not just about being incorporated. You have to have not only incorporated in the business license, but you have to be having other clients that you're doing the exact same work. You need to be marketing on your behalf to get more clients. So you
Yeah.
really have to be operating in an independent company to follow the C. Can you elaborate? I might have done a little sloppy, choppy side on that, but I think I got the general. But let's talk about, how do you know when somebody is considered an established business?
Yeah, no, I think you hit nail on the head. They do have to have other clients that they are procuring on their own, right? That they are performing the same type of services they're performing for you. If they have, some questions to ask is, do they have their own business card, or do they not, right? Do they have contracts with these other clients that they perform the services for, and if so, for how long, and how are these other clients categorizing them, right? That's another question. Are these clients categorizing them as an independent contractor, or are they categorizing them as potentially an employee, right? Or just doing B2B type of transactions? So you really hit nail on the head. They do have to have other clients in order to be considered an established business, to have their own clientele, or the capacity, the ability to have their own clientele.
And with this, as we start looking down the road, and you going back to what you said a minute ago about contracts, when this comes up, we're going to go, when it comes up, some of the things that I've personally seen that cause this to become an issue, or another way of saying it, allows the state to kind of inspect to find it an issue. And then if they do, and you're classified incorrectly, what that means. So let's first start with what I've noticed. And I'm not saying that this is the only way they find out. This is just an example for the audience to understand this. What I seen, and this was a unique situation, but it was just one of them, is during the pandemic, some of the independent contractors went to apply for the PUA, the unemployment insurance, and they clicked the button that they were an employee rather than an independent contractor, which made the state fund look for the W-2 wages and all the corresponding 940, 941 forms that you would have if you were an employee. Find they were not. I became aware of this because anytime somebody gets a legal letter in the SBDC, they come to me, it always sent to me. And I was seeing these letters from the fund, from the State Board of Equalization, saying, well, we are doing an audit to see. And then they were actually identified as should have hired them as an employee, not an independent contractor. And of course, the second thing is, an employee, independent contractor, I should say, complains that they're misclassified, and the state will go after that. So when they do, it really becomes problematic for the company because of all of the fines and penalties. So I'm going to let you extrapolate on what you've seen on how aggressive they are on auditing. And I got to say, my personal belief is I think they're going to get a little bit more so. And then what do you see will happen if they do determine that they've been misclassified? And I'll leave it with those two questions and come back in a second, because it can go on and on, but let's get you to tackle those two aspects.
Yeah, absolutely. So that, that I did also see that a lot of businesses, those independent contractors were claiming to be employees, and EDD was coming back and auditing those businesses and saying, hey, you owe this much on payroll taxes because this person is your employee, and so we don't have record of you ever paying for their payroll tax. So that was one way. Another way that they can find out is that at the end of the year, actually during this time, January, employers or businesses that have had independent contractors are required to provide or to submit a 1099 form, and also submit it to the IRS, right? So they're required to provide it to the independent contractor themselves, and they're also required to submit a copy to the IRS. And you have to check off, I believe there is a section where you have to check off whether or not you did submit one or you did not submit one to the IRS. So that could potentially be a flag for an audit too. And some of the consequences that people can experience from misclassifying workers as independent contractors. They're pretty severe. Penalties start out at least $5,000 up to $25,000, and they can only add up because truly, in essence, when you misclassify a worker as an independent contractor, you're in violation of every employment law. That if that person, and especially if that person should have been an hourly employee, and that you potentially in violation of overtime, meal and rest period penalties, if any were owed, you're in violation of any paid sick leave that they might be entitled to, workers' comp, that's at least a $10,000 fine for not providing workers' comp coverage. And that's another thing that also employers or businesses need to ensure when they subcontract or they contract independent contractors, is that they have to have their own workers' comp insurance as well to make sure that they are covered.
Excellent. And thank you so much, because to guys out there, my goal of bringing people on is to keep you safe, keep you legal, keep you financially sound. That's the goals here. And I can't emphasize enough that if this goes bad, it goes bad real quick and really challenging to get out from underneath. So we're going to go down a minute into what happens when you first hire somebody with the workman's comp. But before we do this, there's another confusion, Xiomara, that we got to clear up. People say to me, but wait a minute, Lori, AB5 doesn't exist anymore. We voted on it from Uber.
No.
And I'm like, no. In fact, it's the worst scenario. Uber doesn't have to deal with it anymore, who was claimed why they started it in the first place. So let's talk about the fact that AB5 is still alive. What did you actually vote for? So many people don't know what they voted, yes or no. They didn't understand it because it was confusing.
They voted on, so back when Uber was challenging this, basically what they were voting for was to whether or not was it going to be legal to classify their drivers as independent contractors. And there were some criteria that they needed to meet in order to do that. They had to provide paid some type of paid sick leave, and they also had to provide, I want to say, some sort of computation of overtime. I can't recall. It was something wage an hour. So that was what was on the ballot, and it went through, right? The majority voted for, but that got challenged a few months later, got challenged by the unions, because they were alleging that classifying the workers as independent, or the drivers as independent contractor, would preclude them from the right to unionize, and which is a law under the state. So so that's still in the works. Actually, that's still pending in the courts. So it has not gone away. AB5 is pretty alive.
Yep, it is. And so the end of that is, yes, it's all these, it's interesting, Xiomara, because I always say to people when I'm talking, consulting, I always say, I'm not being political, but I have to discuss political things, because the businesses are impacted by political decisions. So you have to have a conversation regarding it. So yes, all this is still in the making, but the bottom line is, guys, you're still affected by AB5. So now where I'd like to go is, there's this huge cliff we walk off, right? So the minute we have an independent contractor, we thought we could or we wanted to, but we went, nope, we got to have an employee. We just have one. Immediately, all of these things happen that we have to have in place. We have to pay for, like workman's comp. There's a long list. So Xiomara, why don't you run down? What happened is I say, hey, Xiomara, I'm going to hire somebody and they're going to be an independent contractor and they're going to do exactly what I do. And you go, no, Lori, they're an employee. And I go, well, what does that mean? What is that going to cost me? How do you answer that other than, 2 hours worth? So give us the summary.
Yeah, let's start planning for the labor cost budget. So you're definitely going to need workers' comp insurance. That's something that's required of all employers, even at the one employee count. You're also going to need to register as an employer through EDD and also with the IRS, so that you can be remitting your payroll taxes accordingly to both state and federal. And then you're going to need to also provide certain forms that are required by the state to onboard the employee, process their payroll. Hopefully you have a reputable payroll company that can calculate all the payroll taxes accurately for you, so that you're not being red flagged in anyone's book. And essentially, you're also going to need to provide the required benefits. Paid sick leave is required for the state of California, a minimum of 3 days or 24 hours. If you are in other jurisdictions, such as unincorporated LA County or San Diego, other jurisdictions have their own paid sick leave policies that basically override the California requirement or extend further benefits to the employees.
Yes, so with a couple comments, and this is a shout out, Annie from PCC, SBDC. Annie, if you're in the audience, I'm going to ask you to do something for me in a second here. I want to make a note that Xiomara's got a training coming up on Monday, right?
Yes.
Help small businesses stay in compliance, right? So everything that she just said, if you're sitting back going, oh my God, that was a lot, you get an entire hour, and we have a link. We got a link in there. Excellent. It's in the chat for you to sign up. I suggest everybody that's even thinking you may need an employee around the corner, sign up and get more detail on that, because it's an interesting thing. And I have to speak a little to it from the financial perspective, because that's what I always do. So too often people think, well, I've got sales and I need to get an employee, and they start going down this road. And I have to do a shout out to everybody in the audience. And I talk about this in my sessions, that you really want to make sure you overly need an employee before you put one on. When you already have a couple employees on, it doesn't have to be as tricky of a decision. But when you're putting the first one on, you're usually starting out without a lot of capital, and you have to make sure that you can pay on all these expenses, and that you're going to be consistent enough with your sales and your need, so you don't hire somebody, lay them off, etc. Or you can just get yourself into a lot of a mess with that financially and legally. So you really want to take the time to do the numbers, do the financial analysis, the scenario planning. And I say often, and I know this is a shock to people, but often it's better to reduce your sales or not sell as much than to just need a little bit of an employee, because you can't get a little bit of an employee. You got the workman's comp, you got everything that's coming into play immediately. So hiring somebody really needs to be a sound financial decision before you even go there. So with that, I would like to chat on something, Xiomara. You mentioned it briefly. I'm going to tell you kind of my thoughts on it. And that is payroll companies. I want to speak on this. Payroll, I got to tell you, I'm personally aware of how complicated payroll will be. I'm an LLC and I am taxed as an S Corp. So I'm the employee of the company. So that means I have to do a reasonable salary, and I do my W-2, which I have to do just like a payroll company would be for myself. So many years ago, I decided, hey, I should, I have knowledge. I can do this on my own, right? So the first year I had to have somebody help me. I swear it might be 5 pages that tells me, okay, now what I need to do is I need to go to the US Treasury. I got to do the W-2, the W-3. I got to do the 940, the 941. Now I got to do this. It is so complicated that every year it takes me, just to do one payroll at the end of the year for me, I swear it takes me 2 hours to 3 hours to do. And I have to have all of these electronic accounts set up, and I got to change the passwords. It's complicated. So the first thing I want to tell people is that it is a very long, involved government process for remitting these taxes. The second thing I want to explain, that even if you're incorporated, if you are not taking out the right taxes or submitting the taxes properly, it is a civil liability. I have seen a situation where I've seen many, but I've seen this one, Xiomara, it was awful. They had like 14 employees. They were using QuickBooks Intuit, which isn't always a checking system. I'll talk about that in a minute. And they had taken out the taxes for the 14, but somehow whether they made a mistake or I don't know, they only submitted it for 12. They had fraud, because anytime you don't submit
Wow.
the taxes properly, fraud. And it happened for like 6 years undetected. It got detected and they got liens on their houses, and they will go after every single person that even touches payroll. I learned this when I was being, trained for my EA. You just put the check in the envelope and hand the check out, you could be held responsible. So payroll, guys, is nothing to mess with. And Xiomara, where I want you to take off from here is, I hear people say this all the time. Oh, I found this new free service, or I found this really cheap, or I'm searching for the cheapest place to do payroll. And I am pretty much, and I might have my own biases from being a CFO for years, but I'm a Paychex or an ADP, and I'm top on ADP just because they've been around so long. They've got people who know the laws within the specific states, and they tend to watch your back a little bit more. And a lot of people use QuickBooks Intuit, but it's more, to me, and you'll correct me if I'm wrong, a technology solution. You don't have a human checking it. So that's my little choppy bit of experience. I just know to scream, be really careful. Take it from there and lend us your opinion on payroll.
Yeah, no, I agree with you 1000%. And another thing I wanted to mention for people that are becoming new employers, you're looking to hire your new employee on top of workers' comp insurance, you're going to want to have employment liability insurance, which can cover an employer from someone filing a lawsuit alleging discrimination, harassment, retaliation, but it carves out anything related to payroll, anything related to with the payment of wages, miscalculations, anything like that. The insurance is 99% of the time not going to cover. Most insurances will not. So that is completely 100% the employer's liability, which is more important that everybody gets their wage and hour or their payroll systems in line with compliance. And especially here in California, we have so many different wage and hour laws that come into play. But, in a nutshell, as far as a payroll company for employers to select, my recommendation is always to select, if you're in California, select an employer, select a company that is based in California, because California knows California. A lot of companies will outsource their payroll processing centers to other states, sometimes even overseas, and it does not guarantee you compliance with all the requirements that come with being an employer. Remitting your taxes to EDD, there are several forms and reports that need to be submitted on a quarterly basis. You also, when you hire someone, need to let EDD know within 20 days of you hiring someone that you need to report this new hire, because they keep track of a registry for people that owe any child support. So that's something else that the payroll company should be handling for you as well, and making sure that they are in compliance with that on your behalf. Also remitting taxes to the IRS on a quarterly basis, and your unemployment tax. So definitely you want to pick someone that is based on California. They know California requirements, tax requirements, and the reporting requirements. That's what I would suggest. If you must do it on your own, I definitely would suggest that you become very familiar with EDD's website and all the requirements, with the IRS's requirements. They have some videos for employers in order to get them to comply with all their taxes. But it is a very complicated process. And again, not something where you want to be red flag. Going with what you're saying, the idea is to make a profit, not to actually be penalized down the road for creating a job or hiring somebody. So they must be very careful.
What you're saying about hiring someone in California, or, that's why I like ADP, because they have reps just in California. But once again, going back to during the pandemic with the EIDL loans and the PPP, especially because it was based on payroll, I had a client that did this weird calculation with this salary. I'm not going to get into it, but I was like, it's not right. Where did you get to do that? And they go, well, our payroll company told us to. They weren't based in California. And the point I want to make too is because of that, they could not get the PPP loan. They were not classifying and doing it correctly. So a lot of these, like the grant opportunities that come up, when they look at your documents, it's more than just being liable. It's, you could apply for a loan later and you could find out this document's not done correctly. So it really is important. And for me, if I wouldn't even do my own wage, my company's not registered in California, and I'm not. EDD scares me. I don't have as much complication. EDD scares me. I even if it was just me, which I really, can only do it because I'm not in California. I would not do just me in California. It's a whole nother worms on that one. Here's just a little side note about having employees. So I always remember, and I know you guys remember this or even experience on a daily basis, is when I was an employee many years ago and I would walk into the break room, all those posters would be on the wall, right? So Xiomara, you know what? I always thought when we went online, those posters went away. They weren't needed. That is not true at all. You have to have them online. And that's one thing I noticed ADP does have those accessible. So talk about, let's expand upon not just the posters, but also handbooks and things such as that, because that's another big question.
Yeah. So as an employer, you're required to provide different notices and posters to the employees or have them available in a conspicuous place. When we went during COVID, when we went remote, the requirement still applied. You just still had to make it available either on a shared drive, a share folder, somewhere electronically where the employees were able to access those posters. The reason being is because those posters inform the employees of their rights. And so you not providing that information is really preventing the employees to learn about their rights as they sit with them. So essentially you need to, there are different requirements depending on the employer size too for posters. So there are California required posters, there are federal law required posters, there are some local ordinances that require you to post a notice, such as like minimum wage or pay sick leave notices for those cities or jurisdictions that have those ordinances. So it is very important for employers to still have compliance with those requirements. A lot of times what I do see, for example, is employers that have employees commuting to their job sites from day to day. Like, how do I comply if I don't actually physically have a location? Well, create a binder or create a folder that can be sitting in the employee's vehicle and they can access that at any time. So as long as you have proof of that, that's something that comes up a lot for a lot of for a lot of people, for a lot of employers that have like electricians that get sent out to like someone's residence on a day-to-day basis, or like plumbers, that type of construction type of work as well. So that is how you can satisfy that requirement, still having a folder or a binder where you have all those notices, and making sure that they are up to date, because they do get updated from time to time as well.
I learned so much from you when you're on every single time. So here, what we're going to do is we're going to delve into a few questions, because we got a bunch of questions as well. So one of the questions that we have is, so where can we look at these two tests, and what about tutors who tutor a family week after week? And before you comment on that, I am going to try to paste into the chat one of the informations I got off of the website some time ago about the test, but if you also have a website that you have knowledge. So I'll let you take it from there while I grab some information and put it in the chat.
Yeah, absolutely. You can start out by checking out the Department of Industrial Relations website. They have some information and some Q&As on independent contractors, how to comply with the law, things like that. There's also a subdivision of them that also provides information. Let me see if I can actually find their exact website and share it in the chat. But yeah, essentially, if you go to the DIR, that's going to be your best bet to get that information. Also to pull the posters that we were talking about, and they actually have all the notices, and it's free. A lot of places will sell you like the all-in-one posters for like $50-$70. It's laminated, but if you go onto their website, they have all the postings that you can just download for free. But that's where I would start out. As far as like tutors, I would say it just really depends, you know, again, what the relationship is. If you're the person that's subcontracting, or hopefully not, or you're the person that's like hiring the tutor to provide the services, I'd say your best bet in any situation, you know, my recommendation is always going to be to classify workers as employees as much as possible, unless you have like real concrete you know, relationship as to this person is an independent contractor, you're doing business to business type of transactions, and even then, I mean, there are some restrictions there. Or if you have an attorney like work with you and help you decide, you know, classify that this person is an independent contractor. But my default is always going to be to classify a person, a worker, as an employee.
And, you know, I like to add too, Xiomara, is that when, you know, like you're saying, it depends on the relationship, and the default being classified as employee, you're safe. A lot of this doesn't have precedence in the courts. This law has not been challenged in the courts enough, and precedence is what allows attorneys as well to give better guidance on whether this will be considered in court or not. And we lack the precedent, so we can say our best guesstimate, but we don't have a lot to go on. And there are attorneys who specialize in it that you could speak to, because I know some of them that got in trouble during the pandemic had to reach out to employees or attorneys that specialize in it. But I just want to say to the audience, and especially on your behalf, Xiomara, we can only guess. We don't know, and there isn't even a lot of precedence on this.
Yeah, absolutely. You're absolutely right. And you definitely don't want to be the first one.
No, you don't. Yeah. So as I read some of the questions, I just wanted to kind of make that little fine print. We're guessing. Xiomara's taking a stab at her, may say, hey, I don't even know. So the next one is, what if I hired a website developer, graphic designer, and an SEO from outside the USA? I've had to deal with that on some time, or even a company in the USA to do this work as an independent contractor. What do you consider in both cases? Now, what we don't know from the person in the audience is whether or not they're in the business of doing graphic design or developer. And I think that's one of the key parts, is we don't know if they're hiring them to do this for a company and they're selling some product. So we don't have that, but I'll let you take it a little bit from what we do.
If the person is located overseas, you know, you may have other jurisdictions that apply to them, like within their local geographical area. So I recommend you get familiar with those. But as far as AB5 or the ABC test, I wouldn't see that applying there, because that person, even if you were to hire them you wouldn't physically be able to hire them as an employee here in California. So yeah, that would be my take on it, is that AB5 wouldn't really apply there because the person is overseas, and there is also an exemption for graphic designers there, so you have a little bit of room. But I definitely encourage you to get familiar with any potential laws that may apply, like in the country or the jurisdiction they are based out of, because you may have other compliance requirements there.
And they added that they sell products online, so it wouldn't be the usual course of business. And I'd like to add on that, Xiomara, and this has been my experience because I was asked it from a taxation IRS perspective and had to look into several countries for a private client on their behalf. And there are many laws within our IRS requiring you to take certain taxes out when a person is making income in America over a certain period of time. So I just want to say, and added to that is you got to get to the IRS website because there's a how much tax may you have to withhold from them, even sometimes as an independent contractor in certain countries. I learned that certain countries have reciprocity with the United States on tax holdings. There's once again, you just, oh yeah, you just go. I mean, I must have spent hours investigating this just for one country. And after that, I was like, oh my God, the minute you open up a can of worms, you can be all over on this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
It's so scary. Now, one of the next questions is a little bit on what I said, so I've got to answer it. Can you please explain the difference between corporate officers as an S Corp with only one officer versus an LLC with one member? So I'm going to explain that. So when you are, and I talk about this in my legal webinar, and just like Xiomara on this, I can't go into big details, but just a heads up, I was speaking about when you are an S Corp or taxed as an S Corp. That means an owner is considered an employee in the company. Based on IRS ruling called reasonable salary, any owner that is a working owner, employee in the company in an S Corp or taxed as an S Corp, then must take a reasonable salary if there are profits within the business. That is why I, as the single owner in my LLC that is taxed as an S Corp, is considered an employee, and I had to do a W-2 wage for part of the profits, which is also why an S Corp or taxed as an S Corp has a tax advantage. And in that question, and anybody wants to know more on that, I'll be giving you a heads up next week on when I'm holding my webinar on legal structures and tax advantages, where I get into that a bit more. The only other part of the question I need to answer is when I am the only employee as the owner, or the only owners are employees, there's no other employees, you do not have to get workman's comp. So that fully answers that one question. Also, an FYI, if it worked well, I put a Word doc up there that has the definitions of the ABC, just really back notes that I had some time ago. So hopefully you guys will be able to open that. So now I have another question. Hello, as two employees, me full-time and my husband part-time, how do I handle sick time and vacation? Let me know if I need to ask Claudia a few more questions so you can have some data.
So there are two owners that have been classified as employees, correct?
Yeah. So are these owners classified as employees, Claudia? That's all they had put. They said as a two employees, me full-time and my husband part-time. So I'm a little not sure, and I agree with you on that, because I don't know if they're just owners. That's where a lot of times, I am the owner and my husband is an employee. There we go. So she's the owner and her husband is an employee. And are you I assume you're not an S Corp. So I'll just assume she's not, since she didn't say. So we got one owner and her husband's an employee.
Yeah. So paid sick leave and a lot of the California laws are going to apply to anyone you classify as an employee, with the exception of owners, right? A lot of the owners are exempt from minimum wage, from a lot of the wage and hour requirements. But if he is truly doesn't have any part ownership in the business and it's truly just an employee, then yes, paid sick leave should apply.
Yeah, in other words, another way, that's perfect, Xiomara. In another way, and she did say she's an S Corp. When you're an owner of an S Corp, an employee, like I said, you are not subject to the workman's comp and a lot of the rules we're speaking of. But as your husband, if he is not a shareholder, not an owner of the company, he's an employee and he's no different than any employee. Of course, you know, when you get home, that could be a different story, right? But legally, you know, you might as well just call him an employee, and that's no different. And so even though he's the CFO, Claudia, it really goes to those legal documents and whether he is an owner. So there ties in another thing that I'm going to add is when we look at this from a HR perspective, from a government regulation, from taxation, you also have to look at the legal structures, because legal structures, as you already seen, play into this. And so even if somebody is holding a corporate officer position, but they're not owning part of the company, that still makes them an employee. So a CFO could be an employee of the company, a CFO could be the owner, or like me, when I come in as my company as an interim CFO, I am just another company that people purchase from. So titles don't make the difference. What makes the difference is what is the person's ownership and relationship with the company. Would I have got that kind of way you would have said that, Xiomara? Or anything to add on that?
No, you're dead on. You know, a lot of owners, like I said, they are exempt. Owners and some immediate family also can be exempt from minimum wage requirements. Like I said, a lot of the wage and hour requirements. But the minute that you classify, you know, someone that's not your immediate family member and you classify them as an employee, then all the other laws still apply to them as if they were just any other regular employee.
Yep. And, you know, just because we're out of time here, somebody mentioned about children, that has its own other set of rules. Like even with the IRS, if the child's doing this or doing this or doing that, I mean, there's just so much in. So we're out of time. We're going to have you on again, Xiomara, because we have overflow. We have more going on. Once again, I want to really thank you from the bottom of my heart for coming on and sharing this important information with the audience. It's complicated. It's involved, and you can have somebody that just wanted to start a small company selling some things at the farmer's market, and suddenly they're in big trouble, and we don't want that to happen. So I really want to say, everybody, sign up for Xiomara's webinar. It's worth the time. She'll get into the details that we couldn't get in here today, and we're going to have you back on. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure. And I did share in the chat the link to the FAQs for AB5 that I like to leave everybody with that. So thank you again.
Perfect. So Lauren, we're going to invite you back on to end our show. It was another quite impact show, wouldn't you say?
I would. That was amazing. So good. So good. You guys are so good with each other as well. So it was awesome.
Well, you know, I always say I've got the advantage that I talk both finance and I talk tax and I talk legal structures. But when it comes to HR, oh my God, I'm throwing it to Xiomara. When Xiomara came on at the Pasadena SBDC, I met her and I said, thank God, because I was stumbling sometimes to try to answer some of the questions. Now I'm just like, oh, make an appointment with Xiomara. I'm not touching that with a 10-foot pole. That's pretty funny when I say I talk legal, tax, and also finance, and I say HR scares me to death. That gives you
You're not the only one, Lori. Sometimes I get scared myself too.
It is so true. Well, I want to thank our audience for being here. The frequent flyers. Emma's going to be back on next week, which is real exciting. So thank you for being here on the show. Thank you, Xiomara, and Lauren, as always, for making it happen logistically. Sure do appreciate it. I will see everybody next week. Thank you for being on Small Biz Talk with your host, Lori Williams. Bye-bye.
Bye. Take care. All right, everyone, if you need any, let's see. So all the information related to Lori's webinars are in the chat, as well as contact information for Xiomara. If you would like to get in contact with Lori to, book an appointment with her. Almost forgot my email address. I am adding my email address into the chat. Please go ahead, jot that down, send me a note, let me know what you're looking for, and we will get you some assistance. So have a wonderful, wonderful remainder of the week, and we will see you next Wednesday at 10 a.m. for another episode of Small Biz Talk, solutions for your small business. Take care. Bye.